Welcome to PatsCast. I'm Brad Whitaker. We are a little over a month away from NFL free agency and about 2.5 months from the NFL draft. And a lot can change in that time. But I want to open the possibility that very little does change, at least at the quarterback position for the Patriots in 2024. As we all know, Mac Jones was not put in the best situation the last 2 seasons. He had 2 different offensive coordinators, 3 different OCs in 3 seasons, few weapons at wide receiver. Even the weapons he did have were banged up. Kendrick Bourne missed half the season. Juju Smith-Schuster was never healthy. We all know Devontae Parker has trouble staying on the field. Not to mention Demario Douglas being in the Bill Belichick doghouse after fumbling the ball week 2 when he was clearly the best receiver on the field, really didn't start until halfway through the season. And they also had a really banged up offensive line, a checked out Trent Brown, and Belichick waited until about halfway through the season, maybe a little longer, to finally move Michael Onwenu to the right tackle position, which did make a big difference and helped Zappe more than it helped Mac because he made this decision later rather than sooner. And look, I don't want to make excuses for Mac. He was terrible last season, and he has below average arm strength, always have, probably always will. His mistakes, on the other hand, were largely mental. Things we didn't see in his rookie season when he finished second in Rookie of the Year voting. Probably would have won Rookie of the Year any other season, but Jamar Chase really had an epic rookie season, and that's the only reason Mac didn't win that award. But there is a legitimate argument for bringing Mac Jones back, not necessarily as the starter, but at least allowing him to compete for the job. He's in the final season of his rookie contract, so he's still very cheap. You're not losing much in terms of cap space by keeping him on the roster. Bailey Zappe didn't really show enough to be the guy and might actually be a better trade piece than Mac Jones. Teams would want to bring him in as a backup. They would have another year on his contract relative to Mac. So people may say, hey, look, Bailey, not the most amazing quarterback, but we'd love to bring him in as a second or third string guy. Maybe the Pats could get a 7th round pick for him. Who knows? And let's not forget, Kyle Shanahan wanted to draft Mac 3rd overall in 2021, but the Niners front office vetoed that decision in favor of Trey Lance, which in hindsight probably would have been the right choice because Trey Lance didn't work out. At least Mac Jones is seeing playing time, unlike Lance, who I'm not sure we'll ever see on the field in the NFL outside of the preseason. And let's not forget also, Kyle Shanahan runs a West Coast offense, and that was part of the reason. He thought Mac Jones would fit well into that system. Patriots are clearly moving to a West Coast offense with the addition of Alex Van Pelt as offensive coordinator, and most recently as Ben McAdoo as assistant. He will have experienced coaches coaching him in that more simplified system. Certainly, they will do a better job doing that relative to Matt Patricia, who tried to implement a quasi-West Coast wide zone scheme and didn't really work out and had to find some weird hybrid between the old Patriots offense and the new school offense he was trying to implement. And that was a mess in year 2 for Mac Jones. I think Mac could potentially thrive in a West Coast system. And look, I know the pushback. Mac failed. Let's just draft Jaden Daniels or Drake May and throw them to the Wolves. But how did that really work out with Mac Jones throwing him to the Wolves? And here's an interesting quote that actually came from Tom Brady on his podcast the other day. He said, "We're asking so many young players. All right, we're going to draft you and then we're going to play you. It's not a great way to do it. We're almost prematurely forcing guys out there to play. I learned behind Drew Bledsoe. Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre. Phillip Rivers sat behind Drew Brees for a little bit, and Drew Brees sat for a bit." So even if you are drafting one of these top quarterbacks, it probably makes a lot of sense to let them develop for a season, or at least for a part of the season. And there's no guarantee that they would beat out Mac Jones in training camp. It sounds crazy. Yeah, we all think Jaden Daniels or Drake May would be significantly better than Mac Jones on day 1. But Mac's issues, again, are not making the incorrect reads when he's wearing the red jersey at practice and not taking hits. It's him developing the yips when he loses confidence in the pieces around him and he starts to accumulate all those hits throughout the season, that's when Mac's confidence wavers. But Mac going through the progression, understanding the playbook, showing up to work early, leaving late, like those aren't issues for Mac Jones. There is a real argument to keeping Mac as a mentor in the final year of his contract and showing that next rookie how it's done kind of as a bridge quarterback. And then that rookie will eventually take over if Mac implodes once again, or because their athleticism ultimately transcends the learning curve of being an NFL quarterback. But I don't care how athletic you are. That takes time, and it's going to take time for Jaden Daniels and Drake May to understand how to play quarterback in the NFL, which Mac Jones, with all of his setbacks, certainly does. In fact, I would even argue, don't even take a quarterback at 3rd overall. Either draft Marvin Harrison Jr., perhaps a once-in-a-generation wide receiver. You got that fixed. You don't have to worry about it again. Or trade back to stack a couple of first-round picks and take the best available wide receiver and tackle. There are likely going to be 7 to 8, maybe even 9 tackles going in the first round this year. And maybe you'd still have a shot at receiver at a guy like Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, who seems to be moving up the draft boards. There's a few other receivers that are also expected to go in the first round as well. So this is certainly a deep draft at the receiver and tackle position. You trade back from number 3, get another first-round pick. You take the best available receiver, the best available tackle, and suddenly you got those positions figured out. Then perhaps you can take a J.J. McCarthy, or if they're available, a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr. in the 2nd or 3rd round, who will likely need that time to develop at quarterback as a starter. And in this argument, I'm not even factoring in free agency, where they could go after a Calvin Ridley, a Mike Evans, a Michael Pittman Jr., or even T. Higgins. You could also bring back Kendrick Bourne. I think that's a no-brainer. Maybe Hunter Henry, franchise tag him. I think that's a no-brainer as well. Same with Mike Onwenu. I think he's the biggest priority once free agent starts, is re-signing Michael Onwenu. I think you can get him for $15 million, maybe $18 million tops, but that's worth it for a premier right guard or a highly competent right tackle. Or perhaps you even go after Tyron Smith from Dallas, who you could sign for probably a year or 2 and put him at left tackle. There's also always Trent Brown, who maybe under this new coaching staff would actually give a damn. There's a lot of ways you can slice it, a lot of ways that this would work, but you do some of these moves and suddenly Mac Jones has pieces around him that he's never had before. And I really believe that a confident Mac is a good quarterback. So, look, I know we're all ready to move on from Mac Jones. I certainly was 7 or 8 weeks ago when he got benched. But if you prioritize all the other pieces except for the quarterback position, then, I think it works. And that doesn't mean you don't bring in another veteran as a backup, like Jacoby Brissett or Joe Flacco. I mean, they're both going to be available free agents. I think they would thrive, certainly working with Alex Van Pelt. They've worked with him before. And then you have a QB depth chart of, let's just say hypothetically, Mac Jones, Jacoby Brissett, and J.J. McCarthy. All right? And you have them compete in camp. And then you have Mac out there. Maybe he wouldn't win the job, but in the red jersey, not taking hits in training camp, he's going to do a pretty good job. He's going to make the best reads. He's going to be able to teach that next quarterback how the offense is run and really serve as a mentor. Even if he's not directly mentoring him, even if he really thinks he deserves to be the starter, just having that rookie sit back and watching Mac in training camp do that, even if he doesn't have a strong arm, even if he doesn't always make the right plays, it's going to help them develop. And then you have Jacoby Brissett or Joe Flacco as insurance in case Mac Jones implodes. You let McCarthy sit for a year, or Bo Nix or Michael Penix or somebody, Spencer Rattler, I don't know. Have them sit for a year and then they're starter next season. Look, this rebuild is probably going to take time, but you have the ability to prioritize some of these other pieces outside the quarterback position. You can accelerate that rebuild to just a season or 2. And whether it's Mac Jones or somebody else, you're at least putting them in a position to succeed. I don't think it's the worst idea. Look, I think if you like Jaden Daniels or Drake May, you probably take him. But if you even hesitate a little bit about selecting one of those quarterbacks, well, you have a chance at striking out, which often happens drafting a quarterback in the first round. And then you don't have the pieces to really rebuild around that quarterback. I say you draft Marvin Harrison or you trade back, you get more pieces, more draft capital, you do well in free agency, and suddenly whoever that quarterback is put in a position to succeed. Not the worst idea, in my opinion. So in other news, it looks like Eliot Wolf, the Patriots director of scouting, is essentially the de facto GM. I believe it was Ian Rappaport reported that he is going to be in charge of personnel, both in terms of the front office and the coaching staff working alongside Gerard Mayo. And look, I'm glad it's not Matt Groh, who seems to be in charge of handling college scouting. He was seen all over the place at Senior Bowl practices. We don't know how much of these mistakes in terms of free agency and draft the last few seasons were Matt Groh or Bill Belichick. But either way, it's good to have somebody who is familiar with the Patriot way, but is a different decision maker coming in and being that de facto GM. And that's what it looks like Eliot Wolf is going to be. And Wolf is bringing back a lot of the pieces that he's worked with during his time before he was with the Patriots, when he worked in both Green Bay with that Aaron Rodgers-led West Coast offense and when he was back in Cleveland. Some of the additions that the Patriots have made of recent under this new Eliot Wolf regime is Alonzo Highsmith. He was added as a personnel executive. He worked with Wolf in both Cleveland and Green Bay. They added Jerry Montgomery as a defensive line coach, who also worked with Wolf in Green Bay as well. Scott Peters, he's the new offensive line coach. You look all over X, people have nothing but great things to say about Scott Peters. I think he's going to be a real improvement from Adrian Clem. I guess he has like an MMA jiu-jitsu type background, which is vital when you're trying to incorporate a West Coast offense. He's been in Cleveland since 2020, and if you look at those offensive lines for the Browns, I know the Browns are the Browns, but that's a unit that has not had the issues relative to some of their other units. I think Scott Peters is a great hire for that job. T.C. McCartney also spent the last 4 years in Cleveland. He was most recently spent time in Cleveland as the tight ends coach. He's going to run the quarterbacks room in New England. Not to mention they added Alex Van Pelt as the offensive coordinator and Ben McAdoo, who both of those guys overlapped with Eliot Wolf during his time in Green Bay. So, look, I'm not sure I love this, but basically the Packers and Browns offenses are coming to New England. And we know that offense needs to be modernized. Really, one of the first things Gerard Mayo has prioritized since being named as head coach is giving a real facelift to that offense, moving to a more simplified West Coast system that has certainly worked with Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. It might be more of an old school system, but I'm sure they're going to incorporate a lot of new school elements. It's going to look a lot different, but basically Cleveland and Green Bay, go look at what they've done offensively for the last 5 to 6 seasons, and you'll understand a little bit better of what the Patriots are going to be doing on offense going forward. Now, some of these front office changes are very minor. They're still continuing, again, keeping Matt Groh in a lesser role and elevating Eliot Wolf to basically the director of personnel, the de facto GM. But it is very possible that there are more drastic changes to the front office taking place after the NFL draft in late April. This is very common in the NFL. Teams like to have continuity heading into the offseason. Certainly Robert Kraft has stressed we want continuity here. We're not just going to completely change everything. And teams like to do that because they have front office staff that have been scouting throughout the previous season. You're not just going to get rid of them all heading into the draft because you've acquired a lot of information throughout that time. So if the Patriots are going to name a formal GM or really flip the front office on its head, it probably would not happen until after the NFL draft. That being said, it looks like as of right now, Eliot Wolf, I'm not sure he'll formally be named the GM. The Patriots haven't named a GM in a couple of decades, maybe even longer than that, but it looks like he's going to be in that role. That's it for this episode of PatsCast. Unless there's any major breaking news in the meantime, we'll be back next week. You like what you're seeing here on YouTube, be sure to like this video and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, particularly on Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next week.